All right, good afternoon. I hope you notice my Fahan-like punctuality today. Yeah, I know. It's a new year. I'm going to try to keep that up for at least a day. All right, I will start off with a statement on the plane crash that took place in Iran. The Secretary-General is deeply saddened by the crash of a Ukrainian airliner that took place near Tehran earlier today. He expresses his deepest condolences to the families of the victims and to the governments of all the countries whose nationals lost their lives in this tragedy. Earlier today, we issued a statement from the Secretary-General, in which we said that on Monday, the Secretary-General had made a passionate appeal for peace. His message to world leaders was simple: stop escalation, exercise maximum restraint, restart dialogue, and renew international cooperation. This appeal remains as important today as it was on Monday. For his part, the Secretary-General will continue his active engagement with relevant actors. It is our common duty to make every effort to avoid a war in the Gulf that the world cannot afford. We must not forget the terrible human suffering caused by war. As always, ordinary people pay the highest price. In addition to the statement, I just want to add that the Secretary-General has been continuing his calls to world leaders over the past few days. Yesterday, he spoke by phone with Iraqi President Barham Salih, to whom he expressed the solidarity of the United Nations in continuing support for the Iraqi people. For the Secretary-General, it is important that everyone respect the sovereignty and unity of Iraq. The international community should support the Iraqi people as they seek to create the conditions for political dialogue. Iraq should not pay the price for external rivalries. Today, the Secretary-General is appointing Lisbeth Cullity of the United States as the new Deputy Special Representative and Deputy Head of the UN Peacekeeping Mission in the Central African Republic. Ms. Cullity succeeds Kenneth Gluck, also of the U.S., who completed his assignment in December of last year. The Secretary-General is grateful for Mr. Gluck's dedicated service to the Central African Republic during this crucial period in the political process. Ms. Cullity brings over 25 years of leadership experience in the UN, in Africa, the Americas, and the Pacific. Most recently, she served as Chief of Staff of the UN Peacekeeping Mission in Mali. More information on her bio. In Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, more than 4,000 people have died as a result of terrorist attacks. Mohamed M. Chambas, the head of the UN Office for West Africa and the Sahel, told members of the Security Council this morning. The number of displaced people has increased tenfold to about 500,000. He added that the geographic focus of terrorist attacks is increasingly threatening West African coastal states. Mr. Chambas pointed out the relentless attacks on civilians and military targets have shaken public confidence. Governments, local actors, regional organizations, and the international community are mobilizing across the region to respond to this threat, but he said now is the time for action. Mr. Chambas called on regional and sub-regional leaders to follow through on their pledges and on the international partners to fully support the governments in the region. The special representative will be available to answer your question at the Security Council stakeout in a short while. And turning to Sudan, the government and the United Nations have wrapped up a joint two-day visit to El Geneina in West Darfur, the site of recent deadly intercommunal violence. The delegation assessed the situation to see how to provide immediate humanitarian aid to the most vulnerable people, including women and children and people with disabilities. It is estimated that approximately 40,000 people have been internally displaced, with thousands having already crossed the border into Chad. Humanitarian agencies and partners, together with the government, are currently assisting people with food, water, and emergency household supplies. Health, nutrition, and protection services are also being provided. And the UN mission in the Central African Republic reports that its police component is supporting Central African authorities to carry out investigations, including interviewing victims and witnesses into clashes late last year between criminal gangs and traders in Bangi's PK5 district, and that had resulted in dozens of people being killed. The UN peacekeeping mission is working with local authorities and community leaders, including representatives of groups involved in the violence, to find sustainable solution through disarmament and dialogue. The mission continues to conduct joint patrols with internal security forces in the PK5 neighborhood to help protect civilians and ensure that arms do not flow into an area that was recently declared weapons-free by the government and the United Nations. And turning to Zambia, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that a combination of drought in the west and south and floods in the north have increased hunger, with more than 2.3 million people expected to be severely food insecure through March. 4 districts are facing emergency levels of food insecurity, and decreased access to clean water has also impacted the risk of communicable diseases such as typhoid and cholera. As of December, the humanitarian country team had mobilized $38 million, that's including $8 million from the UN Central Emergency Response Fund, towards the humanitarian appeal, which has a total requirement of $90 million. More funding is required urgently to prevent the humanitarian situation from deteriorating as the country approaches the peak of the lean season. And just to flag for you, later today at 4 p.m., there will be a briefing here with the leaders, with a group called Leaders for Peace, and they will be talking to you on their efforts to raise awareness among political leaders and public opinion about the risk of armed conflict. They will also present their work in developing a creative and inclusive diplomacy, and that briefing is being sponsored by the Permanent Mission of France. I stop here and I listen to you. Yes, Sato-san.
Thank you, Stéphane. You just mentioned about Secretary-General diplomacy with the Iraqi president. So did Secretary-General any contact with the U.S. mission or U.S. government after yesterday's Iran's attack?
Not as of, he has not directly as of this morning. Contacts obviously have been had at different levels. But over the past few days, he's spoken, as you well know, to Secretary Pompeo as well as to Ambassador Kraft. Linda.
Thank you, Steph. I have a question regarding the Iranian attack on the bases. I know in general there's sort of a UN policy that responses to attacks should be commensurate with the original attack. And I was just wondering what the SG feels in terms of this Iranian attack vis-a-vis the killing of Soleimani.
What is important for us is for leaders to walk back from a risk of a major confrontation. As for Iraq, as I said, for our part, it is important that Iraq not pay the price for external rivalries. We very much support the unity, the sovereignty of Iraq. We also take note of the statement made by President Trump not long ago, and we welcome any indication that leaders are walking back from major confrontation and are doing whatever they can to avoid any further escalation.
And do you expect the SG to have any substantial communications with the Iranian president?
The usual discussion is at the level of the foreign minister or the permanent mission. If calls have been had, I will share the fact that they've happened. Yes, sir, and then Zach.
Does the Secretary-General have a particular view on whether U.S. forces should leave Iraq following the parliament's vote there? And did he discuss that when he spoke to Iraqi leadership?
I'm not aware that he discussed that. That is a bilateral issue to be handled between the U.S. And the Iraqi government. Zach.
Was the Secretary-General encouraged by President Trump's message?
As I said, we welcome any statement that shows that there is a step away from escalation and from direct confrontation. So yes, in that sense. Maria, and then did you have a question?
Thank you for.
I know that's what happens when I show up on time. Yeah. You call me Farhan. I know. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Stéphane.
I'll be late next time. Trust me. Yeah.
Can you confirm that Iranian mission sent a letter to Secretary General prior to the attack, and if Secretary General took any action after receiving
Yes,
this letter?
we did receive a letter very recently from the Iranian mission. It is being processed and circulated as requested. Yes, Carla.
Thank you. Did the Iranian Foreign Minister get a visa to come here or not? We were all talking about that yesterday.
Indeed were all talking about that yesterday for quite some time. That question is best asked of the Iranian permanent mission or the U.S. permanent mission. We are there to encourage. We do not hold any stamps.
But is it still being denied, or
again, we're not the ones issuing visas. So the question should be asked to either the people who are issuing visas or the people who request the visas. It's not a question I'm able to answer. Yes, madam.
Thank you. The Secretary-General has offered...
The microphone. There we go.
Thank you. The Secretary-General has offered his condolences on the plane crash in Tehran. Would the Secretary-General want to see an investigation of why this happened?
Well, I think it is standard procedure in civil aviation that there is an investigation, and from what I've read in the press, it will be investigated. And I think normal procedures are whenever, unfortunately, there's a crash, especially one with casualties. The airlines, the plane makers, the national civil aviation of the countries where the crash took place, of those nationals also that perished or involved. So I have no reason not to believe that the usual procedures will not take place, and we obviously look forward to that process. Yeah.
Is there any possibility that the UN would mediate between U.S. and Iran?
Well, the Secretary General's good offices, as a matter of principle, are always available should parties request it. And as you know, I don't know if you were here yesterday, but we did mention that he'd had a series of phone calls with the U.S. authorities, with the Iranians, with the Iraqis, with leaders in Germany, with representatives of many other countries, always delivering the same message. Yeah, go ahead. And then
Thank you, Stéphane. About the cross-border aid operation to Syria, can you tell me the deadline of the operation is the end of Thursday or the end of Friday?
It will. If there is no resolution in the council, they will close by January 10th. If there's no reauthorization, I think we've been underscoring here repeatedly, almost on a daily basis, the alarming humanitarian situation in the northwest and the northeast of Syria. That situation would be markedly worse if we did not have the cross-border operations. We very, very much hope that Security Council members will find a way forward and a solution in the days ahead.
So do you mean the deadline is the end of Friday, New York time?
Like exactly what time it is, I will get. If is it 11:59 on the 10th? I have to check what the. There's always this. Unfortunately, this is not the first time we've had an issue with times with resolutions, but the general gist you get. Yeah.
Iran seems to be taking a lot of efforts to justify their actions under international law, including submitting a letter to the Security Council citing their right to self-defense under Article 51. Does the Secretary General have a view on whether their actions, now that we know a little bit about what their response was, were justified under Article 51?
These letters are addressed to the Secretary General to circulate to the Council. I think that will be for member states to decide. All right. Thank you much. I'll see you tomorrow around 12:30.